Welcome back to School of Śhāstrartha's YouTube channel. It's been a while. This is episode 2 of Vyākarana, which is a series of conversations where we sit with young people and young scholars who wish to participate in philosophical discourse without worrying too much that everything that they say must necessarily be right. So, the point of these conversations is to just participate as young people in philosophical discourse or in intellectual discourse in general. This time around, we had with us Miss Samashti Gubbi, who is an educator of Sanskrit and the founder of Sthayi, which is an organization that seeks to propagate Sanskrit discourse and educate people in the language of Sanskrit. Adarsh was the host of the conversation, and it turned out to be quite interesting. I asked a few fun questions as well, and I hope that you'll enjoy the episode. The episode with Ms. Samashti Gubbi is coming up right now. Enjoy. Good evening, Samashti. Thank you for being with us today. Uh, the main host, because it's not even like we're going to be co-hosts of equal magnitude, Adarsh and I, because I'm mostly not going to speak. So the main host is Adarsh for today. And Adarsh, in a way, thank you for being with us as well, right? The two of you, you prepared a lot for this. In the background, we had a lot of meetings, a lot of preparations, and now this is finally happening. So just go ahead. I'll sit back and I'll listen to you guys talk and maybe ask questions. Adush,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
So,
Yeah.
by the way, our YouTube channel and the whole, whether it's Insta page or anything, we ourselves have named whatever we do as Shastrartha. So, being selfish, we first ask you whether you have anything to say upon the etymological or historical aspect of this word itself. Go on, Samashti.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, everyone. So, yes, of course, the word Shastra, and in Sanskritam, if we take any word for that matter, it requires, a Prakriti and a Pratyaya. So, same way, the word Shastrartha, right? The full name is Shastrartha. For now, we can take Shastra. So, it requires the Prakriti or the root word Shas dhatu, as we call it, and the tra pratyaya. So when I call it as prakriti, the dhatu which is shas dhatu, the meaning of this particular shas dhatu or the foundation word or the root word itself means to impart, to teach and to spread something, to spread the knowledge. And thra, pratyaya, when added to any dhatu, it means the medium or an instrument. So we can, take this word as the Shastra word as an instrument to impart knowledge. Yeah, we can start off with that. Shastra.
Yeah, so the way you define this whole terminology, it seems very untranslatable in English because um, I think it's not just this intellectual part, but it's more of a what do you say, responsibility. The way you defined it to put forward something, to convey
Yeah.
something, as well as to impart with the future generation or something else. Uh, so,
Hmm.
do you want to comment upon this word again, morally or something else from different perspective, like ethical or something? So, like your
Yeah,
perspective, the way
definitely.
it
So
has
what
been.
happens is, right, right.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is, as before going to the intellectual part of it, we can actually connect it to the philosophical way as we were taught, when we were learning the Prakriti and Pratyaya. So the Prakriti itself means an origin or a resource from where, the universal things are created. It is basically the origin. So, and when we also correlate with the pratyaya and the purusha, so purusha is a more of an observer, right? So when the purusha is an observer, we take the pratyaya also as something which is not disturbed or untouched. It is when it gets associated with the prakriti then only it gets the full meaning of that association. So Prakriti and Pratyaya can be correlated with the Prakriti and Purusha as we see it philosophically. Yeah.
Interesting. So, I'm as far as I know, this it's from the Sankhya philosophical tradition. This whole perspective is stemming. So, like as Samkhya has been one of the philosophical tradition, do you think the other philosophical traditions have uh, shaped the definition of these terminologies in different manner? And like maybe I'm jumping from this question to somewhere very far, but especially one of the traditions of the Buddhist has been, yeah, Buddhist grammarian traditions. I think it's around the 4th and 5th century that Dignag and Dharmakirti started their own grammatical tradition. They started to comment upon
Right.
Panini's Ashtadhyayi. So,
Mhm.
going from this basic question, uh, how can we just show the people, or how can we articulate the kind of length and breadth the Sanskrit tradition or the Sanskrit language itself has seen? Because in some manner it does not seem very same with English as well. When we try to describe the language like Sanskrit, we try to say, of course, it's not a local language, it's a global, it does have a global sphere itself. But again, even English does have this global scope nowadays. But uh, but when you go on to see the temporal line itself, like throughout the time, English has not seen so much of history. But if you say that the language of Sanskrit itself has seen the Vedic era philosophers, or maybe some medieval Central Asian thinkers, or maybe the Indonesian people, or even the people as far as Japan thousands year ago. So the kind of history or spaces which Sanskrit has seen, it's so different from the local languages as well, but the present global languages as well. Even Spanish, English, and French, these languages do not have this kind of temporal width. So
Okay.
So I
So
actually got your point, Adarsh. Like, how do we articulate Sanskritam as a language, technically as a language to people, as compared to English or any other, the current vernacular languages as per se. So when we look at Sanskritam, of course, there is no comparison at all, even to the Indian languages. If we include the Indian languages also, we it is it's far more you know of course it is sacred, but without getting attached to the religional aspects or religious aspects or the sacred aspects of Sanskritam. If we take Sanskritam just as a language, what we see or what the Vyākaranas see is the structure of the language, which is very very different from or the the reasoning behind the language. And we can say Sanskritam is the only language which is not object specified. It is property specified. Like when I take an object or the name of that object, it is not associated with only that object. When I say hand in English, the only image I get in my mind is a hand, right? But when I
yeah.
say, when I say Jalam in Sanskritam, there are different aspects that I get. It is not only water
I'm sorry,
that I get in my
Samashti.
mind.
I think I'm so sorry. I think we missed the Sanskrit word that you just uttered because of your network. Could you repeat that again, please?
Yeah, yeah, sorry. So, when we say it in English as a hand, the image of hand comes in my mind, and nothing else comes in my mind. So, when I say Jalam, Sanskritam word jalam, it is not only the object water which comes in my mind, but the actual meaning behind that word, which explains the property of that object. So when I say jalam, it explains it again. Coming to the prakriti of that word, the root of that word is jal, which means the property to freeze, to become a statue. So, jalam is explaining the property, one of the properties of water. So, hence, it is not only object specified, and to mention at this point of time, water itself has 200, more than 200 words in Sanskritam. Jalam, Neeraha, Apaha, all these words, more than 200 words for a single object. And we have more than 70 words for an elephant. Um, that is a basic comparison I can see between Sanskritam and another language.
Yeah, I think the kind of amount, a staggering amount, it does have, whether naming a single thing. It shows the part that this language has been very much thought upon, and this whole thinking, all the rishis or the thinkers or acharyas who have thought upon, uh, it presents its evidence. For example, if there is a particular place which had been civilized at a particular time, it will have statues and architectures and all those things, in comparison to a place which has not been lived upon. You won't find those markings of the human race. So in a similar manner, if a tribal language is given, no offense to any particular language, but of course in comparison to that, Sanskrit has seen so many thinkers and people, so it seems to reflect this part, that all those people have put their traces on, this trace of their thinking has given this huge quantity of words for
Absolutely.
present humans to think about. So this
Absolutely.
has been my interpretation.
Yeah.
uh,
And to add
and
to
yeah.
that,
Hmm.
so when we say the language is timeless, Sanskritam, which is timeless, by that we mean that Sanskritam as an entity, it can be detached from a particular time period, it can be detached from particular people, set of people, or it can be detached from a particular religion per se. So it is, we can say Sanskritam is pan India or pan world. It does not have to stay or originate from a particular place. So when I say it is timeless, it is going to be correlatable from to all the time period which is going to come forward in the near future as well, right? So of course, apart from the fact that it has ancient scriptures and ancient texts and everything, it is going to live forever. It is a language with which breathes, right, forever in the future. So uh, yeah.
uh, uh,
I would like
but
to,
don't.
Adu, before you go on,
Hmm.
interject for a moment and
Yeah.
point out a few things which I would like for the two of you to clarify. So the very first thing is what Adarsh said, that English has a sort of a more global influence. This is
Hmm.
what you said, right? And at the same time,
Yeah.
I suppose you also asserted that Sanskrit is the same. You equated it with English in this particular way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would like for you to clarify that. How exactly is that the case? Second, one more thing, which is you said that English does not have the rich history that Sanskrit has, perhaps,
Yeah.
and that is also doubtful because this might just be, you know, I mean, just the way white people never thought that we would have this rich culture. We are doing
Hmm.
the thing to them because we are so embedded in our own discourse that we're like, well, English does not have any history. Well, look at Shakespeare, look at biblical English, look at the way it has evolved, and perhaps we could find there as well a very rich history. So maybe if you could clarify these two things, that would
Yeah.
be nice. And maybe I would also ask Samashti to clarify one thing. But yes, go on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'll try to give a historical aspect, or a proof of that, or a clarification. Why did I say that? First of all, you reference the biblical history. When we are talking about the language, as far as I know, the language has been Hebrew. So what has happened that in the Western tradition there is, of course, I think, as far as I know, a continuity of 2.5 millennia, but the dominant languages have changed quite much. In India it has also been changed, but we had the Greek philosophical tradition, then we changed to Hebrew, and of course Latin has been the predominant language of the medieval ages, and then we got to English. In the same manner, we had the Prakrit traditions, of India, as well as pre-Prakrit Sanskrit traditions, and these Prakrit traditions went into Apabhransha and modern Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi, and in South Telugu and other traditions. So there has been this change, but on the other hand, the Sanskrit tradition continued again and again throughout at least the Indian subcontinent. You have the whole continuity in Kerala, as well as the Brahmins of, let's say, UP or maybe Rajasthan have been continuously creating new literature, or even Bengal. So uh, so as far as I know, I think what the Greek and Hebrew and Latin and English should be paralleled upon, something with the Prakrit evolvement. We do not speak Maharashtrian Prakrit or Magdi Prakrit. I speak Hindi, or maybe Bhojpuri. So I won't say that Bhojpuri has a rich tradition of 2 millennia. Magdi
Okay.
Prakrit was there, but it is not the same. So, in the same manner, Greek is not English. Of course, they have a very good. Greek can also be called quite global, in the sense that it has influence, in the Western Europe as well, and then the whole Islamic tradition starts with Aristotle and Plato. So that is my first part, not equating these two kind of linguistic continuity. And the other, why did I say that Sanskrit has been global? Because the Japanese has been, at least the Buddhist traditions have been using the Sanskrit terminologies, and to an extent Sanskrit scripts and languages themselves, not in this very high manner, but when you go to the China, the whole transportation, at least around the 4th and 5th century AD, had been there in the China. So of course the East Asian tradition were not doing Sanskrit on as Sanskrit, but they have been doing all the translation and stuff, and they have imported the terminologies and philosophical phrases on all those things. But when you go on to say the Southeast Asia, I think all the major inscriptions, the first inscriptions of the Southeast Asians, whether it's Khmer, or whether it's Vietnam's Cham civilizations, have been in Sanskrit. So the Southeast Asian traditions, Indianized empires had this parallel. They had Sanskrit and Khmer as official language. They had Sanskrit and I think the languages of Malay and all those languages as parallel. So Sanskrit is global, not in the sense that it has influence all over the globe, not in America, of course, but at least in the major part of the Asia. And of course, when you go on to see from a historical perspective, let's say 580, the Asia had been a bigger part of the globe, because you did not have the contacts with the whole Americas. So Asia itself becomes big in that sense. So global, not in the sense of winning every territory, but in the sense of a good part of the globe, like French have, like the Germans have, or Spanish is a good example. We do not speak Spanish, but still it is seen as a global language, because I think it has influence in South Americas, maybe Mexico, I'm not sure, and of course the mainland
Yeah,
as well.
essentially South America until Mexico. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So I suppose
I
yes, that is actually good enough a clarification for the time being. Indeed, that's very interesting. Samashti, I would like to ask you to clarify all them. Um, I'm forgetting what exactly were you speaking about right after answering Adarsh's question. I think it was something about being a timeless language, right? Sanskrit being a timeless language.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but I think I'm forgetting the exact articulation of the question. So I'll just ask you to go on if you could.
Yeah, to also add to Adarsh's previous explanation, and yeah, when we stand out from time periods and regions and dive into the depths of the poetics in the Sanskritam and other languages, if we want to compare, the Sanskritam already, I mean, it does have all the alankaras and poetics, such as if we compare Upama, it is in English called as simile, and then the Rupakas and yeah, the Rupakas are nothing but the metaphors, and as I mentioned, Shlesha are the puns, uh, as we call it in today's world, in today's English. So yeah, coming back to the timelessness, it is also it's already existing. In every other language, it is already there. All the other or every poetic articulates are already there, and they have been discovering it, and it's again a full circle when we talk about the depths of the language.
So are you saying that Sanskrit is timeless because it discovered these poetic devices and literary devices which other languages also use, and so in that sense, it is timeless because it already discovered something fundamental about language itself, which is universal.
Yes, one of the reasons, and because of its algorithm and the technicalities to create more and more words. If to take an example, if I want to create a word in Kannada, or per se in Malayalam or Tamil, a new word I cannot create. I have to go back to Sanskrit. I have to go back to the technicalities of Sanskrit. For example, take the word Vahana. Okay, in I think Malayalam also it is a Vahana, but Kannada. Let me stick to Kannada. In Kannada, it is Vahana, and it is not pure Kannada. Vahana is not pure Kannada. Vahana means a vehicle. So a vehicle is a modern object, right? So to find a word to that modern object in Kannada, I had to go back to Sanskrit. Vahanam is a Sanskrit word. Vahati, Vahati iti Vahanam, which means, something which carries and moves. So something which carries, Vahati, I had to come back to Sanskrit and find an algorithm and find the prakriti and pratyaya and make a word and then use the same thing in my language, right? So any and more modern objects which come into the world, we have to refer to Sanskritam for making the name of that object, for the nomenclature of objects. So that is what I mean by it is timeless.
Others, should we move on to the next segment of the conversation because you two had a lot to
Yeah, sure.
converse about? Although I still have that question, Samashti. I don't know if we can address that, but the entire bit about
Uh,
how
I
how
think I'll try to clarify in 30 seconds what Samashti said
Yeah,
in the last point. That
yes, yes. Others, just a moment. Let me just
yeah.
it with Samashti the exact thing that I wish to ask her. I don't know if we can, right? So we can just put it aside. But the
Hmm.
entire bit about pizza and Sanskrit having a word for pizza, and then this way of just constructing words, and if we could talk about how that happens exactly, it could be quite interesting for anyone watching this, right? So if maybe consider that if we can talk about it, then good enough. Otherwise, we can just move on. But Samashti, you
yeah,
can think about it while Adarsh comments.
yeah. I can
Whatever
just
topic
finish
Adarsh has.
finish that part of it actually. So what happens is this Italian dish. which is a pizza. In English, I call it as a pizza. In Spanish, I call it as a pizza. If I'm speaking Kannada, then I'll say ಒಂದು pizza kodi. So in every other language, I'm actually calling it as a pizza only. But Sanskrit is so intriguing that it strives to find a word for the object pizza for such a modern dish such as pizza, um, and an Italian dish pizza. The word for pizza in Sanskritam is Piṣṭa-ja. Again, the Piṣṭa means the dough, and ja means created from. So created from a dough. Here, the language does not want to move completely away from the original word, which is pizza. It wants to stay close to that word Piṣṭa-ja, pizza and Piṣṭa-ja. Otherwise, to completely translate into Sanskritam, I mean, traditionally finding a word for it would be so alien to the original word pizza. So, it is so compatible, we can say. The language itself is so compatible that I can make a word very close to the original word. It might be Italian or Spanish or French per se.
Just one follow-up question, Samashti, although I mean I'll have many, but I'll just choose
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go with
sure.
one, which is, then would this be the case with every word, parallel word that we construct in Sanskrit for any word in other language? So if I say a broom, right, which is
Hmm.
called a jharu in Hindi, so a broom, right? If I construct a word for that, although I'm pretty sure that's not a particularly modern
Hmm.
invention, so Sanskrit might already have a word for that, or maybe if I could say, laptop, right?
Yes, yes.
So if I were to have a word for it in Sanskrit, would you necessarily construct a word which sounds very much like laptop? Is that what we are going by? And it will mean somewhat the same thing. Like, you understand the? I'm trying to
Yeah, got it,
inquire
got
into
it.
the complications of this construction.
Right. So not necessarily every other word or every other modern object can be named very very close to it, and so hence coming back to the broom, we call it by the property that the object does. Marjanam karoti marjani, so it sweeps, right? So hence we call it as a marjani. And Sanganaka is the word for the computer because it computes. It's a calculator, right? So the job that it does, it's calculation. So the Sanganakam is the word for the laptop or the computers. So
As I'm sorry, as a philosophy student, I can't help but ask that,
yeah.
wouldn't this also mean that the word that you used, san kadaka, it could also
Sanganakam.
right, okay. What is it again?
Sanganakam.
Sa-
Sanganakam.
San Gadakam,
Yeah.
right?
Sanganakam.
Yes. So this would also suffice other conditions, other meanings for other objects, like for example, an abacus, you see, or just a calculator, an electrical calculator. So then there are certain complications there, aren't there? Like,
Yes.
a calculator and a laptop would mean the same exact thing. So maybe if you wish to answer this, that's all right. But no more follow-up
Yeah, yeah,
questions
yeah.
from me.
No, no, no.
Yes.
Definitely. So what happens is we can have additions to that. For example, a mobile is Dura Bhasha or Duravani or Achala Duravani. So sorry, Chala Duravani. So mobile, because it is mobile, it can be taken anywhere. So we call it as Chala Duravani. So which means chala is mobile, something which can be taken anywhere. So chala sanganakam is also a word which we can create, right? Chala sanganakam, which is a mobile computer which we can take anywhere. So a laptop can be chala sanganakam as well.
I see.
So again, similarly in English, when I say uh, mobile, it can be the noun mobile and also the um, adverb mobile, right? So same way in Sanganakam, it goes with the context that I'm talking about, right? When I'm using it in a sentence, so it goes by the context of what Sanganakam I'm using it for. So that also happens in Sanskrit.
Yes,
Yeah.
I suppose that is a good point, actually, the one you made right at the end there. Others, you had something to say, right?
Yeah, so it's related to, I think, everything, every question or follow up question which has been given in the last 10 minutes. Because whether it's pizza, I think uh, I won't pronounce because I think I'm not able to do that. But the Sanskrit word for computer, let's take on one hand, and the pizza word. Uh, I think there is a two different style of adopting to the modern needs or new languages. First one is try to search your own basic words, or roots of the words, like for the word computer, and try to make sense of that word. Or on the other hand, take out the phonological aspect of the modern words like the pizza, and try to have some sort of permutation combination of the your root words which fit with the phonological connotations. On the other hand as well, that it tries to have some particular meaning. It's not just adoption. Because I think this tendency to always have a particular thinking, or to show particular thinking to that word, whenever we adopt a new word, it's very peculiar to Sanskrit. Because in that word, a lot of the words which have been taken to Hindi or the most local languages, they just pick up, we just pick up for our everyday use, like we pick up the mobile, we don't think of, that much. But since the people who are involved with the Sanskrit have been doing the work with theoretical underpinnings, so it kind of has started influencing the way Sanskrit responds by adopting, whether it's modern words or modern ideas or anything. So
Right. One more,
I think, yeah.
just a small example related to the etymology of samosa. अभी हिंदी में समोसा क्यों कहते हैं? We don't know. Nobody knows, right? Samosa, why it is called as samosa? We haven't even studied about that. Whereas the Sanskrit word for samosa will be samashah. Okay, mashena sahitam samashah. We can do the etymology of that, which means mashaha means the stuffing. Okay, so sa means along with. Something which is along with the stuffing is known as samashaha. So they have created this word so close to samosa, and they have gone one step forward to also put a meaning behind that word samosa, which is samashaha. So that is also one of the compatibilities we can see in Sanskrit. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I think, I mean, of course,
mhm.
we'll have a lot of follow up questions here, but I think,
Mhm.
Adarsh and Samashti, we need to
Yeah,
move on to the next segment of the conversation, right? So, Adarsh, you can go ahead with whatever you have to comment, but I will
mhm.
not dare ask
Yeah,
any follow up question to that,
yeah,
and I'll, you know, request that Samashti, you as well, let us just move on with the conversation because we still have a lot to talk about, right?
yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Adarsh.
So just the
Yeah.
लास्ट कमेंट आई मेक कि हिंदी में कर देता हूँ जो समष्टि बोली थी, कि मुझे ऐसा नहीं लगता कि देर इज सम इनहेरेंट थिंकिंग, थिंकिंग की समंदर विच इज देयर इन द संस्कृत वर्ड्स. इट इज जस्ट दैट द पीपल हु हैव बीन इन्वॉल्व विद द संस्कृत की आदत है हर चीज के बारे में सोचने की, तो वो चीज सोची जाती है, तो वो सोच दिखाने के लिए भी होती है. कोई समोसा समोसा के इटमोलॉजी के बारे में सोचता नहीं है, तो दिखाने के लिए भी नहीं होती है. So yeah, we'll
Right.
move on to the next question.
Wittgensteinian language games for anyone who is interested. I'll not elaborate upon this. People can look it up. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So the second part, we'll try to delve in is the Vedic classical dichotomy which has been created, and with that, for a simple introduction, the two major forms of Sanskrit which have been academically accepted are the Vedic Sanskrit, which have mostly been related to the Vedas, the language which has been composed in, and the other is the classical, I think, post Paninian Sanskrit. Uh, so, like, the few question you know which is there in my mind, the first of all, like, is, has there been some sort of intermediary mode of the Sanskrit, between the Vedic ones and the classical ones? And the other one is that, of course, the grammatical tradition, or Vyākarana tradition, has been there, pre Panini. Panini himself has mentioned several schools. So, and one of them, I've seen that in Kerala, there have been some work on the other Vyakarana tradition other than the Panini. So, how do you see the different varieties of Sanskrit as well as the different varieties of Vyakarana school or darshana itself?
Absolutely. So,
Uh,
what happens is the basic difference between the classical Sanskritam. Was I lost? Yeah, sorry. So, to start with, the basic difference between the Vedic and the classical Sanskritam is the Sanskritam was a more perfected version of the Prakritam, and Prakritam definitely is not related to any kinds of the Vedic literature that exists. So Sanskritam in itself means something which is perfected, something which is molded and perfected into a language itself is Sanskritam. Samyakkritam iti Sanskritam. So, by that, I also want to say that in comparison to the other languages, Sanskritam is a language which is spoken or pronounced the way it is written, or it is also written the way it is pronounced, right? So I will not have any dialects of Sanskritam. I will not have any different accents of Sanskritam unless you're from, of course, different areas or different regions. Of course, we will have accents, but Sanskritam is written as it is pronounced, and it is pronounced as it is written. So that is one major thing we need to observe in Sanskritam. So uh, that happens in the Paninian language, but the Vedic Sanskritam, there are a lot of words in the the words which are only used in the Vedas. For example, we have all learnt about the Hrasva and Dirgha. For example, and A. We all know about and A only, right? Which is is one matra or one blink of an eye, and A is two blinks of an eye. So this is there in the Paninian grammar and post Paninian grammar. Whereas when I see the Vedic Sanskritam, it has one more matra which is called as Pluta, which is three blinks of an eye. So that is only used in Vedic Sanskritam. So these are very subtle differences we see in the see between Vedic Sanskritam and the Sanskritam which is perfected by Sanskritam which is perfected. Yeah.
yeah. So, I think, even though it had been perfected, but um, I think I'll disagree with one of the points you earlier said about it being very universal throughout time, in the sense that even though it's it's plastic, it can mold itself in all of the different social linguistic traditions, but I think the kind of the history it has, I can go anywhere, but I cannot escape my history, because my own history will go on to shape how I am going to respond and how I am going to shape the other traditions. So, in the similar manner, I think the Vedic tradition, the same way, the way Nietzsche, or let's say Hegel thought, commented, or disagreed upon, will not be cannot be uh, made distant from the what do you say, the Aristotle's or Plato's tradition. They will always haunt these thinkers. So I think in the same manner, the Vedic thinkers or the Brahmanas, the people who compose the Brahmanas, or the following every literary
Right.
tradition. So how do you see, because those the first thinkers and all those first compositions later on got to shape the Prakrit traditions as well. Yeah. and
Yeah.
uh, One of the interesting thing I like about the Sanskrit is that whether it's Hindi or Telugu, or it's Kannada or even Tibetan, or maybe some Southeast Asian language like Thai, their grammar has been shaped from on the basis of the Sanskrit Vyākaranas. So of
Right.
course uh, the the Vyākarana itself, which has affected so many languages. I think, as far as I know, I don't know in depth, but from a simple Wikipedia knowledge, there was, I think, some 13th century grammar work for Kannada,
Hmm.
which has been the main uh, grammatical work for the present Kannada,
Correct.
uh,
Correct.
which has been based upon the Paninian tradition. So
Right. So again,
I'm
what happens is
mhm.
when we say sorry to interrupt. Just one
Yeah,
small
yeah,
thing.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, when it comes to Paninian grammar, he again mentioned the Maheshwara Sutras, which were attributed to the the whole Ashtadhyayi later. So Maheshwara Sutras are totally different um, in structure as compared to the grammar which has been influenced, which is influencing all the other Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil, Hindi. So the a, e, e, u, u, ru, e, I, o, all these are you know uh, the later parts of modernization of the grammar. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Yeah.
Yeah, but don't you think, I'm not talking in the reverse direction, that all these modern grammatical way, whether
Hmm.
there are divergences, I think maybe if some language have three modes of as you said, some might have
Correct.
two, and so don't you think that they owe it back to the Sanskrit literary, because it is from those they
Definitely.
have diverged upon. So in the manner, if I want to know, if I want to do some archaeological survey of the thought of the Nietzsche, I need to go back to the Plato and Aristotle. So don't you
Perfect.
think, in the same manner, if I want to know some sort of at least grammatical kind of thinking of Kannada or Thai or interrelation between them,
Hmm.
maybe I need to go back to the Vyākaranas. So, do you think uh, any work has been done upon some sort of historical study of the grammar, not only Sanskrit grammar, but the grammars it has affected upon?
Absolutely. So what is
I suppose
happening?
to summarize it very briefly, Adarsh, I think what you're trying to ask is, has there been any work done to uncover the relations between present day languages and their Sanskritic or whatever roots, right?
Superstructure, some sort of, maybe. I'm not sure, but
Let's not
yeah,
use
yeah,
that.
yeah,
It
yeah,
suffice,
yeah,
right? The
yeah.
roots, Sanskrit as the root of present day languages, some present day languages, right? That is what you're trying to ask, right? I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, a very, very basic representation of how Sanskrit has influenced on the Aryan languages and Dravidian languages is very simple. The vocabularies used in the Dravidian languages are most of them taken from Sanskritam, and the structure of the language um, uh, of the structure of Sanskritam has influenced on the Aryan languages, is what we can say. So, this is the basic study which has been done. So, when I say vocabulary I think I've mentioned this earlier. So vocabulary in Kannada, Malayalam, Telugu, Tamil is also similar because it hails from Sanskritam, right? So, for example, pustaka, or I can say, you know, drishti, or samudra, as you said, right? Samudra is there in Kannada, it is there in Telugu. So most of the vocabulary has its effect on the Dravidian languages. When I come to the Aryan languages such as Hindi, if I take, the structure of Sanskritam is one basic example. The objects are differentiated by their genders, right? Every other object also has its gender. For example, a table is strilinga, utpithika, or a tree, vrikshaha, is a pullinga. So these kind of structural and technicalities of the language has its effects on Hindi, because Hindi also has बस स्त्रीलिंग में है क्योंकि बस आ रही है, राइट? एंड अभी बोतल बोतल गिर गई, बोतल गिर गया, आई थिंक, राइट?
गिर गई.
गिर गई, yeah. So yeah, objects also have strilinga, pullinga, whereas we don't have that in Kannada or Malayalam or Tamil.
I'm sorry. I think we just caused a great offense to the gender of bottles. It is actually, I think, bottle gir gaya, right?
गिर गया होता है, yeah.
Yes.
So
Go on.
that is the influence of Sanskritam on different languages. When we look at it as the structure and technicalities of the language and the vocabularies of the language.
I think it has affected and led to some of the incidents which I face in Karnataka. For example, I have been taught the meanings of Guru, Vara and Nayana, where the other person has assumed that I don't know the meanings of those. So
Okay.
So I don't know why, but it seems to show that people are not aware that we do have a common tadbhav. Like many people do know that, but on a common level, it's not that much known to people. So moving on to the next question, I think moving on to the next part, on the poetry discussion or the Kāvya traditions.
Okay.
So do you want to start with a again word Kāvya itself? Like I think it's quite different than poetry in the sense that much of our way of thinking on poetry has been uh, based upon very limited, in the sense that at least in, let's say, in Urdu, it always mostly means some sort of shairi, ghazal, something to be sang upon, or something very performative, and maybe uh, aesthetic as well. Aesthetical and performative parts has been emphasized upon on the word poetry or the shairi, or in Hindi, what is it, kavita, yeah.
Kavita.
But when we go on to the Kāvya part, there has been a very code literary, in the sense that you can do even mathematical work upon that, or maybe a Vyākarana itself might have been done in the style of the Kāvya. So it's not that much performative or aesthetic sense either. It's just a
Yes.
hardcore academic way. So this, I
Definitely.
think, makes Kāvya a bit different. So do you want to comment upon that?
Right. So Kavya is not. It cannot just come with speaking the language. If I can speak Hindi, or if I can speak Sanskritam, doesn't mean I can write the Kavya also, or have an expertise in Kavya. So they say, Nan Rishih Kurute Kavyam. So to become a Kavi himself, uh, he has to become a rishi first. So nan rishihi kavyam kurute kavyam. Nan rishihi kurute kavyam means to become a poet, he has to first become a rishi. And they also mention that all rishis cannot be poets, but all poets are definitely rishis. It is a tapas. We believe that it is a tapas in itself. So having said that, you know, to mention one more thing, which is there in Kannada also, Kavikranta Darshano Bhavati. In Kannada, it is said that Ravi Kanadannu Kavi Kanda. Something which cannot be seen even by the sun is seen by a Kavi. So something which is not seen even by the Ravi is seen by the Kavi. So Ravi Kanadannu Kavi Kanda. So in the Kāvya Mīmāmsa, Rajashekhara explains that Kavi Kranta Darshano Bhavati. Of course, this is from the Rig Veda, and similarly, he says that um, uh, you know to become a Kavi, he has to become a Rishi first. Yeah, and if he doesn't know the careful selection or discrimination between the vocabularies and words, he cannot even be considered to you know sit among the poets. Kavinamapi sanasti tataha. Kavinamapi sanasti tataha. He says in one of the shlokas, right, in the Kāvya Mīmāmsa.
So the shloka of the Rajashekhara has been taken from the Rig Veda itself. This Kavi and Rishi relation. Or
So that particular phrase, Kavihi Kranta Darshano Bhavati, is from Rig Veda, but there is this one more shloka, I think it was by Chanakya, not mentioned in any of this thing, but Kavinam chet kavita vacho vivekam vina yasya vagvishah prayanti. This was the shloka. Yeah. Kavinam chet kavita vacho vivekam vina yasya vagvishah prayanti. This was by Chanakya. Very sorry. Yeah. Sanasti tasyaha prema priyam cha kinchit kavinapi sanasti tataha. So Chanakya explains about this poetry. Yeah. The Kāvya.
so yeah, you want to say? Go on.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems that Big Veda, and I think the other Vedas as well, have put Kavya on a bigger ladder, very bluntly. And it kind of shows, the influence kind of shows in the way you have learned Sanskrit itself. So my question is that, is it very necessary to learn some poetical works of thinkers, major thinkers, as they have told in the, let's say, BA you have done?
Right. So again, when we look at the departments, different departments that one goes through learning the Sanskritam, we have the Vyākarana Shastra, we have the Sahitya Shastra, we have the Tarka, Vedana, and everything. So a person who is learning Vyākaranam, as myself, if you ask me, I wouldn't necessarily learn Kāvya with the same interest I'm learning the Vyākarana Shastra. Is that what you're asking?
No. My question was, like, if I've read any of the subjects,
Okay.
it's not that much necessary or mandatory to learn the, as quoted parts of the thinkers. Like, you are referencing Chanakya as he said, you are referencing Rajashekhara as he said. It would not have been possible if he would not have written in the form of poetry, because it's easy to learn poetry or singing or something.
You were saying, is it necessary to, quote somebody when we are saying about the importance of Kāvya,
Yes. Yeah.
have usual interpretations of
Be-
self.
yeah, because I haven't seen this tendency, for the people to quote uh, as their original thinkers have thought, because of, like, did something
Yeah.
happen?
No. Yeah, that is very interesting. Just people quoting everybody and not having a self thought. If that's what you mean, right?
No. I meant that, if let's say Nietzsche have said anything, it would be in prose. He has not written poetry. I cannot remember the prose part, but the way Sanskrit rhymes, the Kāvya part rhymes. It's easy to remember that. Uh, so there is one thing, I'm going to interpret Nietzsche in my own terms, but that will not be Nietzsche as himself. So
Okay.
I cannot bring Nietzsche without me as a mediation, without my language as a mediation. So this is something which prose lacks on a greater level, since we cannot remember the syntax of the prose, but we can remember the syntactical structure of the poetry. So
Huh.
the original thinkers can be brought without the mediation of the speaker. That I was trying to show.
Okay. Yeah. I got it.
Yeah. So, moving on the poetry part, let's move dive into the Rajashekara. So, you have studied the parts of Rajashekara's main work, Kāvya Mīmānsa. So, do you want to give a brief introduction to the people what that book is about?
Yeah, definitely. So, in the Kavya Mimamsa, we can say, which is a handbook or a guidebook for a person, to become a poet, or for major explanations of poets who have come before Rajashekara, pre-Rajashekara also. So, he mentions, the first is the Kavya Sangraha. Um, he mentions about the Kavya Sangraha, where it has different chapters, of course. So in the first chapter, he goes about, this. He has the style of creating his own different world altogether when he's explaining Kavya. Um, so he personifies the Kavya um, as two people, and the relation between two people, which is the Kavya and the Sahitya Vidya as well. Um, you might have learned about that as well. So um, gradually he builds a relationship, between the Kavya and the Sahitya Vidya, and he personifies them both throughout the chapters. And he also mentions about, what an ideal poet should be. He goes about saying what kind of background a poet um, responsibly should have, as in he should be, maintaining the cultural and traditional um, righteousness of his family, and the way he also mentions about the costumes that a poet should, um, essentially have, and the responsibility of the poets, and what kind of environment they live in. What kind of environment? By that I mean the poets are always, their responsibility itself is to please the king, and that itself creates a lot of competitiveness among them, and that necessarily will not apply for now, of course. So when it was seen as a career in itself, Kavihi is a career in itself, that he mentions about the responsibilities and behaviors of a Kavi, per se. So that is what is Kavya Mimamsa all about. Yeah, major thing
Yes.
is the figures. Um, he gave a framework and a structural framework to the poetics, right? By that I mean the different figures of speech and different aesthetics. He gave the names to each and every figure of speech, to each and every aesthetics. Um, right. So figures of speech: Upama Alankara, the Shlesha Alankara, the Rupaka Alankara, um, the Yamaka, the Yamaka, the Prasa. All these was coined by him in the Kavya Mimamsa.
Yeah, so commenting and taking that forward, especially whether it is the personification, like I think it was Kavya Purusha and Sahitya Vidya Vadhu. This,
Kavya
this
Purusha.
was the way he
Yeah.
personified them, or taking all those central questions, fundamental questions on what is poetry itself or how it has been born, or even creating a whole mythical, we should not say mythical, but narrative, a whole
Hmm.
narrative about the poetry. What makes Rajashekara very different and very interesting, and I would say very uh, non-expected to present Indians. I'm just talking for Indians. Uh, is that the tendency for Rajashekara's thought to ask all those bigger questions. He always interest himself in the bigger questions on the birth of the poetry, or the fundamental meaning of the poetry itself, or playing with that. He very confidently adds the Alankara as the seventh Vedanga, which has been associated with the Vedas itself. So he's very confident in putting himself as one of the main thinkers in bigger tradition of the uh, Sanskrit literature himself. So this tendency, I see it kind of lacks in most languages. It is all the languages which have a great, which have a comparatively bigger tradition, like the French, English, even Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
who dare to ask those central philosophical questions. On the other part, as I said earlier, we can find poetry in even tribal languages, and it's a good
Right.
thing. But don't you think that bringing one of the best fruitful outcomes of bringing Sanskrit into the discussion again would be its ability to, interest itself in central questions or the bigger questions, because it seems to be lacking. Yeah, and I want to ask a follow up question as well.
Mhm.
Remember this, that since Hindi has been the academic language, at least in the great areas of North India,
Okay.
so it should behave, to what do you say, to create philosophical traditions, or to ask bigger questions the way the French continental traditions ask, or the way English philosophical tradition asks. Do you see that Hindi is doing the work in a very great way, not just exceptions, or the not so the underground ones, but do you think it is doing the good way, or should it learn from Sanskrit? So yeah, the Sanskrit question as well as the Hindi question.
Yeah, absolutely. So, coming to the recent question, what is the current scenario, as we discussed, was is poetics or Kāvya itself is so different and alien to the current current students who are studying a language, or the even the creators or the current poets also, they do not dive into the depths of the language or the kavyas and the traditions that they have to actually follow. um, that is one thing I would like to say about Hindi um, for now. And Sanskritam, coming to what is, you asked me how different is Rajashekhara compared to the other poets. One thing is, he was sticking to the traditions, sticking to the culture, sticking to the rules, as we can mention, as well as creating something so um, ahead of its time. Like Karpura Manjari, it's in itself is a, romantic comedy, right? So we are also intrigued by the rom-coms which are coming right now. But the scenarios that he mentions um, in the Karpura Manjari, the uh, um, convincing her father and all those things, those scenarios exactly I don't remember, but yeah, those are very they're very ahead of its time, is what I want to mention. When I compare it to Kalidasa, of course Kalidasa's was a different level of he was way before Rajshekhara, but Kalidasa's was all about um, connecting, I mean personifying a cloud as a person or a messenger, and then sending love stories to a telling love stories to a cloud, and then sending it ahead to the lover, is so much different extremely when it is compared to Rajashekhara's creations, which are so on point and practical, yeah, so practical and so relatable even today. So that is what makes him, I think, unique
So
and important for the kavyas. Yeah.
Yeah.
the literature.
So,
Mhm.
so a follow-up question. Can you name the different genres or different kind of literatures the ancient, I think pre-modern Sanskrit literature has been dealt in, and on the other part, of course, the modern Sanskrit literary tradition, like you mentioned earlier, they have been adopting from the Japanese kind of writing as well, or even the local, from Dohas to Gujarati. Style of writing. So, can you mention different genres or the even maybe the names of the plays or poetry, both ancient and modern?
Right, right, right. So yeah, the different. You want me to explain the um,
Hmm.
like different creations of different people, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, or if it is the genres you can name, it would be easy because maybe the creations would be too hard for remembering something like that. As you
Mm-hmm.
wish. As you
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
now
yeah.
like romantic comedy has
Uh,
been one of.
I would, Adarsh, I would like to ask you, how would you even define genres and even say English poetry?
I think he means the theater, the nataka, different sahitya, different forms, right? In the Sanskrit literature, like natakas are there, then epics are there, then only kavyas are there. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and even the sub styles, like of course, even it's any language, it won't be based upon every kind of, like, it might be comedy or it might be something maybe different, maybe philosophical or something like that. Like as you said, Kalidasa's work was based upon personification very heavily.
Hmm.
Uh, so
Right.
it has been very personified, but it would not be the same for all the Sanskrit literary traditions. Different thinkers would have their own styles of creating their poetry or Kāvya. So I just
Absolutely.
want to ask the styles, variations of styles.
Mm-hmm. So, one thing I would like to mention is, yeah, when we take the classic Valmiki Ramayana, it is again, you know, what you can say is, written in a very, very simple language. His basic idea was to reach it out to the commoners only. So, the story of Rama. So, again, when I look into um the creation of Rajashekara himself, when he created Balaramayana, again he simplified it more for the children to understand the Ramayana. So there we can see a different perspective of different poets, but of the same story, right? So we also have Champu Ramayana. Champu Ramayana was written again based on the Valmiki Ramayana itself, but to mention the category, Champu means Gadya and Padya as well. So there will be dialogues and there will be poems as well. So these were the kind of different categories we could see the same story in, right?
Yeah, so and on the modern part, uh, like, can you explain about those, especially the, I think, late 20th and 21st century Sanskrit literature?
Right, right. So when it came to later stages of after Rajasekhara, we had okay, you're talking about the 20th, right?
Yeah, yeah,
The almost the current this thing.
yeah.
Generations, right? Yeah. So again, of course, because it is the Sanskritam, they have followed the same Rajashekhara's Kavya Mimamsa um, book, the guidebook. They do not go lot more away from the um, you know the structure of the poetics, the structure of how a poem should be created. So, of course, the modern Sanskritam poets, they have taken a little bit of liberty into, um, you know, following the chandas in a very liberal way, um, so as to comparing it to the old poets. Yeah. So when it comes to chandas, we don't. The modern poets do not see. They have to um, create this poem in Anushtup Chandas or the any other chandas for that matter. So that is one of the liberties they are taking nowadays, um, which is considered as the modern Sanskrit. They have named it as modern Sanskrit, but of course there are only two categories: Vedic and classical Sanskritam. And nowadays they have categorized one more categorized Sanskritam into one more category, which is modern.
Yeah, so like maybe it would be too earlier to ask, but
Yeah.
coming on the current academic situation of Sanskrit, can you explain where, I'm not saying place in a purely geographical sense, but do
Got
you
it.
think that there are certain areas where, the work on Sanskrit has been, in more pace? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some universities, or are there some sort of central organization which kind of hold maybe yearly councils or something like that on Sanskrit, to allow different people from different areas to discuss upon the state of the language itself?
Absolutely. So there are central universities and national universities, uh, especially only for Sanskritam. For example, the very famous National Sanskritam University in Tirupati. So national Sanskrit universities um, um, have been there throughout India. Like Varanasi has a lot of Sanskritam universities in the same city, and uh, uh, Karnataka, Bengaluru, Karnataka Sanskrit universities are there. So every university where it stands currently is, the educational part of it is they have only one option, right? To build a career in Sanskritam, they have only one option to go and become a lecturer in one of the universities or in one of the schools. We do not have much opportunities as to go to abroad. Very very rarely, people go to German Sanskrit universities and teach there. So very very limited opportunities has been created for Sanskritam is what I want to say about the current scenario.
uh, it may be very blunt or maybe misgeneralization due to a lack of knowledge, but do you think the kind of study the Europeans did, I think in 19th century, they had their interest peaked in Sanskrit. Are we even doing at that level, or are we our interest even a bit lower in comparison to the kind of interest they did have? At least as far as I know from the general knowledge, they studied Sanskrit from a whole linguistic aspect. The way they included the whole Indo-Aryan languages in
Right.
that. So, do you think are we even doing that much work
Hmm.
from our perspective, or you know it's a bit more shameful situation for us, something like that?
Right. From
I
the
mean,
commoner's point of view,
Samashti, right before you go ahead and answer this,
yeah.
about this, we must keep in mind that the fascination of the English mind with Sanskrit, um, in the 19th century and onwards, was not motivated by this noble intention to study Sanskrit, right? They wanted to, in a way, look into their own history, right? Because they knew in some way, in very deep way, that India was this very um, historical culture, and that it probably extends back prior to even their own culture, right? And they saw these connections between the languages and whatnot, so they had to, in a way, establish what exactly, because or maybe I shouldn't go, on that
Yeah,
tangent,
yeah, go
because
on.
they wanted to establish this sense of understanding so that they could dominate even more
Yeah. So
the
there
culture
were
of India.
different
So it was with this noble
reasons which
intention. We must keep this in mind. But with this, yes, Samashti, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Like you said, there were different reasons which influenced them to study Sanskritam, right? To connect it to the current scenario, the studies happen only to go and become something in the field, right? Uh, yeah, Adarsh was saying something.
Yeah, like even though the intentions might not have been that good, but
Hmm.
do you think you know, still I think we need to ask that question, even if let's say the
Adarsh,
intentions. Hmm.
I'm so sorry, but I know that your question is just and valid. It's just that I was
Hmm.
giving this background to it. We
Yeah, yeah,
should not mistake their intentions as very noble. Yes, of course, they had
yeah,
their
yeah,
interest. And of course, we need to ask this question: where is, are we doing even half of what they did, regardless of their intentions? It's just
yeah,
that we
yeah.
must know what their intentions were. And to add something so important
Your voice is not coming actually.
at all.
Hello? Yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah, you are audible.
Yes, so it's just that it was more so a piece of nuance, nothing else. So your question still stands, and
Yeah,
some of you can try answering that question. That
yeah,
are
yeah,
we putting in those efforts, even half the efforts that the Europeans did to study Sanskrit?
hmm, right. So, studying Sanskrit in itself has different position, when we compare it to the Europeans, the way they studied Sanskritam and the current situation which is required, the attitude which is required to study Sanskritam is totally different. They wanted to dive into the depths of the literature itself, but now the current scenario is, if we introduce literature itself at the beginning, the I think the people will run away just by looking at it or hearing about it. So uh, people have found different approaches to introduce Sanskritam to people. When I say Samskrita Bharati, it has simplified Sanskritam and it has made a structure. The school has made a structure of how to teach Sanskritam to the commoners, like you teach a language to a baby, right? They have started from that level. So I think we need to start from that level as teachers and as learners. It is very much required, to introduce myself to literature of Sanskritam. First, I need to know the language, right? So, for example, if I'm reading a Kannada newspaper, to understand that Kannada newspaper, I understand that Kannada newspaper because I speak Kannada every day, right? So, if I have
hmm,
a Sanskrit literature, for example, Ramayana at my home, if I open that book, to understand Ramayana, I need to know that language. I need to speak that language every day. So that is one of the approaches we need to keep in mind to start with. So that people are doing, but it will take a long time to explore literature for in that level, as you mentioned. Are we
And I
putting that much
suppose,
effort? I think
yes,
no.
and I suppose, Samashti, would you say that we must also keep in mind that people are not just going to study Sanskrit out of nowhere again, because
Hmm.
we must understand that just like the Europeans did not have this noble intentions, even we ourselves, it must apply to ourselves that we're never going to have this, if not, if not just okay. So perhaps to some degree there could be this noble intent. Oh, I wish to study Sanskrit because it is my heritage, but a part of it also is other factors, right? Maybe someone could be seeking a job in it, or someone thinks that they're good at it, or it's just that since they were very young, they were exposed to Sanskrit literature, and now they have this inclination towards it, right? Um,
Hmm.
was it by the way, the case with you that you were from a very young age exposed to Sanskrit literature?
Yes. From a very young age, we were just, our father used to take us to this residential course in Karnataka. So that is how we were introduced, and then uh, yeah, it does matter about how a person is introduced to Sanskrit, right? So a lot of people nowadays, what they're seeing is the intention behind learning anything is they're asking for added advantages. So whenever somebody, a lot of people ask me what are the added advantages of learning Sanskrit. So as a fellow Indian, I don't think that should even be a question, right? Because French people don't see added advantages behind speaking French, or same case with this Spanish people, right? So somewhere I think it should just naturally come to you as an Indian. I mean, this is my point of view. It shouldn't be a compulsory language or something, but this is what we should have in mind, basically, before asking questions about why Sanskrit.
But I suppose, Samashti, the thing
Yeah, it's
is,
quite funny that even
yes, go ahead, Adarsh.
yeah, it's quite funny that the Western Europeans were not that much related to Greeks in the sense of influence. You know, here the Sanskrit had its own sub, like in Mithila region or whether it's Kerala region, had its own version of the tradition. So those people who had become so much distant from the Greeks, or from starting, I don't think the upper Europe part did have that much historical relation with Greeks. They went on to study Greek, and in the best manner ever done in the world. So yeah, in that way, it agrees with your point that we ourselves, whether I am from Magad region, Magad had been. I think it was Rajshekara or someone else who said that the Sanskritam of the Magad people is very good, but their Prakrit is not that much good. So this was the
Yeah,
comment upon my region, or it whether it was Ayush region, the Kaushala, where the Kanva Brahmana school was there. So, or whether it's you, Samashti, like for the current scenario, the Sanskrit tradition is quite good comparable to us. So it's quite very important point that we should not ask. Like we should ask, but we should keep this in my mind that the way the Western Europeans did for the Greeks, we should do at least 10 times more than that for Sanskrit. So yeah,
yeah,
that
yeah,
would be my opinion.
And
yeah,
I would here
Yeah,
like to just disagree without any
yeah,
hopes to
yeah, yeah.
convince you to agree with me by saying that we must, I mean, look, we live in this weird sort of a practical age where we cannot convince everyone to um, do things for the sake of it, because doing things for the sake of it is essentially art and religion. And so I suppose Samashti, Sanskrit and studying Sanskrit must be very close to a religious experience for you, just like maybe philosophy is for me, and philosophy and like specifically Indian philosophy perhaps is for others, right? So we must, other than this, give people incentives, right? Just to cite an example, during the Cold War, the incentive to go to the moon was actually whose supremacy is going to be established. Is it the US or the Soviets? It was not just this pure, noble minded, scientific ambition to go to the moon. No, it was also fueled by. Adarsh, I hope you're still there, right? You just turned off your camera.
Yeah, sorry for a second. Yeah, go
All
on.
right, right. So it was not just this pure, noble, innocent minded scientist doing his job. It was motivated by other factors. So I suppose I would urge you, Samashti, to think about ways in which we can we can we can incentivize the learning of Sanskrit. This is why I suggested to you the other day when we were conversing that we must have these stories from the
right,
past, right?
right.
Being
So,
retold in new ways, right? And perhaps
yeah,
after a point of time, think about this. If so, we listen to songs in Punjabi. I won't go about this for very long, right? So we listen to
yeah,
songs in Punjabi. And Punjabi songs are so cool. They're so nice to listen to. They're so pleasant to the ears. Now, because people wish to, enjoy those songs, they're going to learn Punjabi. You
Right.
see, so suppose there's a very nice short story or a very nice poem in Sanskrit. If people really wish to understand that, then they're going to learn Sanskrit. You see,
Right.
philosophy students
So,
don't learn
uh,
German just for no reason at all. They learn German so that they can study Kant, so that they can study, all of these figures, Hegel and whatnot. So maybe
right.
consider that as well. It's good
Correct.
that we have this noble intention in us, but in order to convince other people, we must also look at the practicalities, I suppose. What do you have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
say about this?
So, that is what Sthayi has been working on. Detached from its traditional connection with Sanskritam or religious or um, space for that matter. So, we are looking at it only as a language. Hence, we are creating, the podcasts in Sanskritam, and we have these songs in Sanskritam. We just sit with it, sit with a song with a guitar and sing in Sanskritam. So that was the previous idea or approach which I said was only about myself. I cannot what do you call compel anybody to learn Sanskritam with the same idea as mine. So what I can say is, I think in one of the articles I just read, a lot has been already let go of. Right? It was just unfortunate for us to let go of Sanskritam because of some invasions or anything. So it is not anybody's fault. You know. So what can be done now is, like you said, making Sanskrit cool, making Sanskrit not godly.
Precisely, that is the best way to put it. Making Sanskrit cool. Yes, that's the way to go. Yes, go on.
Yeah, because we have seen Sanskrit schools and boards, so they're so godly. They just looking at them, the branding and their logos. Just looking at them, we can say that this is a religious institution. Whereas Sanskritam is not just related to one religion, right? So, right. That's why we had these Sanskrit marathons. So people from different sectors like corporates and different religions, they took part in this Sanskritam marathon, and they were really intrigued to learn Sanskritam as well, just as a language, just for the love of it.
uh, I do have a follow-up question. Like, since you have been teaching
And
Sanskrit to
Adarsh,
people,
Adarsh, just a moment. The
yeah,
follow-up question that you have, I'll now request you to please stick to that, right? And Samashti, please, if you could
yeah,
just answer that and
Okay.
yeah,
what
yeah,
we have about that, because now we must conclude, right? We're already
yeah, yeah,
past the 1 hour 40 minute mark, so maybe this could be the concluding
yeah, yeah.
section after which we could conclude the conversation. So yes, please go ahead, Adarsh.
Yeah, so you have been teaching Sanskrit to people. So they must have their own opinions upon on the state of the Sanskrit, or why they are themselves learning, or how do you see this learning for them personally in future, and Sanskrit as a whole in future. So do you have anything to say about the others' experiences, the people who have been teaching Sanskrit to?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happens is, I I don't know if I'm boasting at this point of time. They come with a different intention. Per se, I want to read Ramayana every day. Whenever I read Bhagavad Gita every day, I want to understand Bhagavad Gita. But I say yes, yes, yes. You can understand Bhagavad Gita after this course, after this many months. And I think I manipulate them into just loving the language, just looking at it as a language later, and then they just end up in speaking the language so fluently and prominently, and with that confidence, they go and study Bhagavad Gita elsewhere. So that confidence that I can speak Sanskritam, and Sanskritam is so easy uh, to look at and to listen to, and it is such a simple language, even simpler than any other Indian language. If I go and uh, learn Kannada, it might not be possible in you know uh, 2 to 3 months. But Sanskritam is so already inside us. All the words are there, all the vocabulary is there. It's just it's needed to bring that out. Um, so that is what is happening in my class. Yeah.
Samashti, could you
Yeah,
also recommend some educational places where people could pursue their Sanskrit studies, and also how they could get into it? And perhaps even if, I mean, if someone were to wish to enroll in your classes, how could they do that as well? Right? So if you could just put
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
when we talk to
Uh,
guests.
so yeah, different institutions. I think I mentioned earlier. If we want to take up uh, in depth of a particular department, if I want to study Sahityam, or if I want to study Tarka, then I can enroll into a BA and MA, and they're just exactly like all the other degrees, like 3 years of bachelor's and 2 years of master's. So the structurally they're the same system. Um, but I would suggest that spoken Sanskrit is at most importance, uh, uh, at this point of time. And some of the institutions which are doing really, really good job is Samskrita Bharati, from where I started my journey, and Vyoma Linguistic Labs. It has everything. I think I can say Vyoma Linguistic Labs is the place if you seriously want to pursue Sanskritam, and if you also just visit and then log off. That is also possible in Vyoma Linguistic Labs. So it has a huge spectrum of looking at Sanskritam, and it has every department. If you want to take up different departments seriously, and you can study from home as well. uh, I don't know why I'm marketing them so much, but if you want to learn spoken Sanskritam, I think yeah, we do that. We do conduct classes.
yeah, yeah.
I see. Thank you for that, Samashti. Adarsh, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. So, yeah,
That's all.
Ayush.
Well, then, Samashti, any concluding remarks from your side?
Yeah. uh, you know
I mean,
uh,
it's not necessary. If you genuinely have something to tell us, I mean, sure, then go ahead, right? But it's like it's out of courtesy that I'm asking you, because we don't wish to finish off this conversation by you know not letting the not letting the guest speak what they really had on their mind, and just push them off away with unfinished thoughts. So yes, that's the.
Oh no, nothing as such. But just the fact that I wasn't able to start with a formal introduction. So formal, what do you call, formal start to the talk. So we started off with Shastra and etymology. So first thing is thank you so much, Ayush, Adarsh, and Shivai for connecting with me. So. It definitely is a very different experience for me to be a guest, because all this while I've been the host and the anchor, or the person who asks. So this was like asking myself a lot of questions. So I and Kāvya is a different department altogether for me. So if it was Vyākarana, I think um, I would have spoken more and more. But yeah, this was a really interesting thing that I've done in 2023. Thank you so much.
I mean, I'm sure we landed you in muddy waters, I suppose, by talking about Kāvya, but we could, I hope, have another conversation in the future where we specifically talk about Vyākarana, right, and go in more detail. And this conversation, I suppose, in any case, was, I mean, quite fun. So thank you,
Yeah,
Samashti, for joining with us today. Um, Thank you for giving us your time, and I suppose have a good night now.
yes.
All
Thank
right.
you. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed that conversation. Click here to check out other interesting videos from School of Śhāstrartha. To subscribe, do not forget to do that. You can click here.